Urbex never again. My name is Sarah, I'm 22 years old, and I think I've experienced the worst Urbex imaginable. I'll do my best to describe the scenes as much as possible, and it was 3 years ago. At the time, I had a boyfriend who was almost 30. My thing was exploring, taking photos, and learning about the history of the places. I found it so fascinating. However, my boyfriend at the time wasn't at all interested in this kind of thing. At the same time, he'd never done it either. But he saw me in such awe of this activity that he finally offered to come with me. I was so happy. I usually did it alone because my friends don't like it either. I know it's not good to go alone, but I'm stubborn. So, very excited, I started looking for a spot. Of course, I won't say how I did it. It's TOPSECRET. So, I searched for about an hour, checked and learned about the spot in question, and it was still relevant, and apparently it wasn't very well known yet. I found the location very exciting, and we decided to go there that same evening. We took the car, no luck, it started to rain, we didn't back down, we were determined to visit this place. An hour's drive later, we struggled a bit to find the building, but finally we realized we had to continue on foot because it was hidden behind a small forest, and the path was too damaged to go there by car. We decided to park and turn on our torches. We walked for a few minutes until we came across the building. It was actually a large hotel in pretty good condition. We decided to walk around the building to make sure there was no one there, just to be a little safer. My boyfriend wasn't very calm at the time, but I tried to reassure him as much as possible. At the same time, it was a first for him. Suddenly, I saw him turn his head towards one of the hotel windows. He had a panicked look, and he was sure he had seen a small light upstairs. I admit that I didn't really believe him at the time. I just thought he was hallucinating because of the stress. Don't worry, there's no one in this kind of place, come on. Let's take a little tour, then we'll leave again, I promise. That's what I was killing myself telling him, the poor guy, when all he wanted to do was leave. We finally found a small entrance. It was a weird feeling. You know, the feeling you get when you turn off a light and you feel like someone is behind you? I feel the same thing, but it was constant, with every step, in every room. We continue to visit, and then we end up hearing a noise as if we were pushing a wooden piece of furniture and it creaked, you see? The noise was coming from upstairs. And then, while it was getting to my head, I remembered the light that my boyfriend thought he saw before we came in. At that moment, we both looked at each other, not really knowing what to do. We had no choice but to shout, "Is anyone there?" No response. It must have been an animal. Still with more and more suspicion, we decide to go upstairs. We climb the stairs, step by step, lamp in hand, in total silence. We quickly notice that all the doors are closed except one, the one at the very end of the corridor, which is wide open. Just as we are about to move forward, we notice a shape at the very end, but we couldn't see what it was. The lights weren't strong enough. We had to keep going and going until a human form began to appear as we got closer. And then we saw with our own eyes a guy standing a few meters away from us, staring at us without even saying a word. The most chilling look I've ever seen in my life, you know? The same look you get when you're full of hatred? Well, it was the same here. My boyfriend was pulling me along so we could start running, and I was frozen to the spot like an idiot. I was afraid to let him out of my sight. Suddenly, we saw him pull something out of his pocket. We couldn't see what it was, but from that moment on, we started running as fast as we could to the car. My boyfriend had lost his flashlight in the panic, and we were getting hit by branches, but we didn't care. I kept turning around to see if he was following us, and I saw the light upstairs heading in our direction. Like it was a little laser, you know? When we got to the car, we turned on the ignition and left. The next day, I learned on the news that a body was found in the trunk of a car that was parked abandoned right in front of the building where we were. For those who are curious, it was in Isle Manoir in the Dordogne. I can tell you that my boyfriend never wanted to do Urbex again after that. Now I live in the city. Hello! So, my name is Rose, I'm 23 years old, and I live in Nouvelle-Aquitaine. This story happened almost 10 years ago, and I admit I'm still not really over it. I lived in Paris until I was 11, and out of love, my mother moved to Nouvelle-Aquitaine to live with my stepfather and his 2 children. I knew my stepfather and his children very well. We were in the same age group, so we were always together, so much so that we forgot we weren't really siblings. When I was around 13 or 14, one summer our parents went away for a week because things weren't going well between them. They really always taught us to be independent, so they left us alone at home for a week. My father-in-law's daughter was the oldest, and she was starting to have little parties with her friends, and of course, we were invited. The day after her party, the guests had left. We started tidying the whole house, and since we were exhausted, once the house was tidy, we just sat down in front of the TV, had something to eat, and that was it. You should know that our house was truly worthy of a horror movie. We lived right in the middle of the forest. We only had one path to get to the house, which meant it was a cul-de-sac. Around our house, we had about 100 hectares of forest, and the nearest house was almost 1 kilometer away. It's an old Charente house that was originally a farm, so it's long and about 250 to 300 square meters. It's almost 200 years old, so everything creaks in the house, from the stairs to the floorboards upstairs, but we're used to it. That time we were smoking joints, and we said to ourselves that we would go to bed, smoke a joint, and that each of us would go to our room once we had finished our joint. Except that my stepfather's son, the youngest of us, had forgotten his phone downstairs, and so he went back downstairs to get it. About 5 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was our little brother calling. So we picked up and asked him why he was clearly annoying us by calling us when we were right upstairs. Then he hung up. So we sent him a message to find out what was going on, why it was a mistake, and immediately afterward we received a message telling us not to talk. We complied without really knowing why, but we continued to whisper a little. Then about 2 minutes later, he asked us to discreetly look out the upstairs window to see if there was anyone on the terrace outside. At first we thought he was really making fun of us. We had watched a horror movie that same evening, so we thought he just wanted to scare us a little to piss us off. So we sent him a message saying, "Oh, that's really funny." And it stopped there, except that a minute later, we heard a huge noise coming from outside. And we saw 2 guys on our terrace, one of them with a knife like a kitchen cleaver. Then they started yelling, and one of them said something that still chills me to the bone. "I swear they were here yesterday. I saw the light from the forest." And we could have had all 3 of them and even more. The little brother, who had hidden in the bathroom on the ground floor, which had no window, went to get his phone and stayed all night, and ended up falling asleep just like us, hiding upstairs. The next day when we got up, our doors showed signs of an attempted break-in. We called the police, as did our parents, who came home immediately. Of course, they never found the men behind this, since we were in the middle of the countryside, so there were no cameras. After that, they had surveillance cameras installed around the house and at the entrance to the path to get there. Personally, I had nightmares about it for years, and for years I slept with the eldest of us, which also helped. Then our parents finally separated, and I must say that today I'm happy to live in the city with surveillance cameras everywhere. The tram giant? I just discovered this French subreddit, and after reading some of the stories here, I wanted to share a story that happened to me and terrified me for a long time. First of all, for context, I'm a woman in my 20s, so unfortunately, stories with weird guys who want to harm me happen regularly. But this event I'm about to tell you about really affected me. I was walking home from college one evening. It must have been around 6:30 p.m. in the fall. At that time of year, it starts getting dark quite early. I was with a friend, and we were waiting for the tram as usual to go home. We both live in the same part of town, which is about 7 tram stops away. However, this time, my friend had an appointment somewhere and couldn't go home with me that evening. She still stayed to wait for the tram with me, just to chat a little. The tram finally arrives, I say goodbye to my friend, and so I get on the tram. Miraculously, there are free seats, so I settle down quietly in one, wearing my headphones as usual. While waiting for the tram to start, I begin to feel like I'm being watched. I see a gigantic man staring at me as if he'd spotted me since I'd boarded the tram. Still staring at me, he sits down opposite me. This man must have been at a glance 1.95 meters with a rather strong appearance. He had absolutely immense hands, truly the build of a giant. What made my blood run cold was his gaze. He was looking at me with eyes that said he didn't want me well. Instinctively, I felt that this man was strange, that there was danger. So I changed seats, which is normal, and I text my boyfriend to tell him there's a really weird guy on the tram. However, this man always stares at me, no matter where I sit on the tram. He stares at me in the reflection of the window or directly at me as soon as I'm in his field of vision. And this goes on for the entire 7 tram stops until I reach the stop where I have to get off. So I get off at my stop, telling myself that I've escaped this really strange giant. If only. As I get off the tram, I start walking back up the street, and there I feel like I'm being watched again. I turn around and see him again, that man, following me down a nearly deserted street. I'm starting to get very scared. He speeds up as soon as I speed up, slows down as soon as I slow down. I send a message to some friends or quickly describe what happened on the tram, and a physical description of the man following me. Sensing the man getting closer and closer to me, I called my boyfriend, who was at home at the time, discreetly telling him what was happening. I also asked him to leave the building so I could defend myself if I ever had to physically defend myself. Without looking back and still on the phone with my boyfriend, I ran to my building. When I finally arrived, I threw myself into my boyfriend's arms, completely panicked. I looked around, and there was no sign of the man who was following me. Since that incident, I always carry a weapon to defend myself in case I encounter someone like that again. I never knew what that gigantic man who terrified me that night really wanted from me, and I don't think I really want to find out. In any case, if I hadn't run home that night with my twig-like build, it would have ended very badly. Intrusion? Hi everyone, something unexpected happened to me yesterday morning, and I thought it was an opportunity to post here. For context, I live in Canada in an area where the rate of drug users, especially crack and coke, is horrendous. I live alone in a small semi-basement apartment, so my windows are at ground level. So it was this morning, in my underwear, lying in bed watching TV, when I heard a scratching noise at my front door that grew louder and louder, eventually turning into actual creaking. I quickly understand that someone is trying to force my door, so I take out my rifle. I live in the north in the middle of bears. I work and study in nature, and I have been shooting for years, so yes, I am armed. I load it and prepare 911 on my phone, then go back to my room and wait for the situation to evolve to make the decision to call 911 or not. Shortly after the noises at the door stop, however, my window of my room is just above my head when I am in my bed, and a few dozen seconds after the end of the forcing of the door, I start to hear footsteps and someone talking to himself above my head. Then I get up from my bed with my rifle still loaded and position myself facing the window. I wasn't delirious. In fact, through the curtains, I discerned the silhouette of a man who was trying to observe through the half-open sliding window, and quickly I see him and hear him put his hand on the window to open it wider. I try to slow my heart rate to be able to stay calm and remain in control of what I am doing. I still have a firearm in my hands, and I must not use it for anything other than deterrence. I have no desire to shoot anyone. After a few seconds, which seemed much longer to me, the intruder has finished sliding the window and puts his hand in front of the curtains to lift them and go under them. When his head passes inside my house, he finds himself facing me in his underwear, his head in his ass with a rifle pointed at him. Big blank until I say, "It's okay, I'm not disturbing you. Do you need help perhaps?" In response, he gave it, with great difficulty speaking, drooling liters of saliva and looking completely lost. "Good morning, sir. I didn't think this apartment was occupied. Sorry, I was just leaving and closed your window." Which he did. In conclusion, I think he was just a poor man on drugs who didn't really know what he was doing and was looking for a squat. So I didn't even call the police, lacking the courage to put this person in an even more precarious situation, knowing that he absolutely didn't seem seriously ill-intentioned, nor to find myself in endless legal proceedings while I had my classes and work to attend to. Thank you for reading. I hope I told this recent little anecdote well and that you enjoyed it. Prince Charming doesn't exist. Hello everyone, I'd like to share my story to free myself from this burden that had become too heavy. It all started in 2017. I was on the cusp of turning 21 and I was happy. I had a great job, a fulfilling social life, a loving family, and incredible friends. But everything changed after the encounter that changed my life, and for good reason. At first, everything was going well in the best of all possible worlds. He seemed perfect. But looking back, I realized he was too perfect, to be honest. Anyway, months passed and everything was going well until I got pregnant. And despite the fact that he told me he was delighted to be a father again, that's when his behavior changed. At first, it was nothing much, just derogatory and unjustified remarks here and there. It was very occasional at first. I told myself it was stress, and the more time passed, the more the remarks became nasty and frequent. It went from, "Get a move on, you're not doing anything," while I was taking care of his children and my pregnancy because I had gained a lot of weight, to, "You're going to explode, you're so fat." At that point, you wonder why I didn't leave, but at first I naively thought it would be temporary, and that he was stressed about working while I was on sick leave because of the complicated pregnancy. And when the little one was born, it was worse. But the problem was that he made me think I was going crazy. For example, when he made a remark to me and I responded, he dared to say I was crazy, that I was exaggerating the situation, blah blah, and little by little he started to make me doubt myself. And that's when things became hellish because he turned me into a zombie who thought I was going crazy. I was a shadow of myself, to the point of falling into depression. And that's when hell began. Insults punctuated my daily life, as well as threats. If I left, social services would come and take the little one away because, after all, a depressed person can't take care of her baby. In short, he had me under his control, and I was too weak to think straight. It was awful. He had cut me off from the world, and I felt so miserable I wanted to end it all because my daily life was so unbearable. He smiled when he said I'd make a beautiful gift for his daughter if I took myself out of the picture, that I was a burden to everyone, that I was a piece of shit, and many other things I had unconsciously forgotten. But one day, He dragged me by the hair and threatened to kill me, and I had a surge of strength to leave with my daughter. Yet the story isn't over because in 2022, here I am still depressed with a state of severe derealization with psychological follow-up. The inability to have a normal life again? And all this why? Because of an encounter. So take care of yourself and be careful who you give your heart to, because you can pay dearly for it. I dive into real stories like this all the time, some from Reddit, some even darker. So if you want more chilling tales, strange encounters, and things that should have stayed hidden, hit that subscribe button and check out my other videos. You never know what you'll uncover next. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay curious, stay safe,